I will call this special workshop of the Jacksonville City Council to order. We have a copy of the proposed agenda for this meeting before you, and I would entertain a motion now to adopt.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? I've got two items on here. One's a review of the concepts for splash pad at Jack Amyette, and the other's a report on the North Carolina League of Municipalities annual conference, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Woodruff at this time.
Mayor, members of the council, we're very pleased tonight to bring you two concept plans that we would like to have you give us direction on which you prefer relative to the splash pad, which is in your budget for this fiscal year. This will be built at Jack Amyette as part of the overall park improvements which you've approved, and it is primarily being funded through the Community Development Block Grant Fund. At this time, Deanna Young, who's the project manager, will give you an overview. Deanna?
Good evening. So as Dr. Woodruff had mentioned, staff advertised a request for proposals in August, and we approached this project a little differently than we've done in the past. We actually decided to bid this as a turnkey project, so it's all-inclusive for both these concepts that we're going to look at. And our budget is, for the splash pad itself, is about $190,000. The difference there, staff is actually going to design and install some of the utility connections necessary to make this a functioning splash pad. And again, this is going to be funded in part by the Community Development Block Grant. So this is the first concept that we're looking at, and we're calling it the Mickey Mouse design for obvious reasons. And as you can see, the layout gives you three different segments where different age groups can meander through the area. This splash pad concept has bubblers, which are flush with the ground, and then they have the above ground features. It's another perspective. And this splash pad obviously will be very large and to accommodate 35 to 50 people easily. Part of the splash pad, we're looking at putting some additional benches and some shelters out there, so that those that are sitting around with their young ones and looking after them, they have some shaded areas. So this is the first concept. The second concept that we had them evaluate is a baseball theme concept. Realizing that council spent a lot of money in redeveloping the Jack Amyette Park, we thought perhaps we should consider looking at this option. And this is one concept where, unlike the other one, you'd have dyed concrete to represent your grass and infield. You could have a bench seating to accommodate those that are watching your children. And this allows the children to run the bases to go from first, second, and third. And then we've also got the outfield area where that could also be for some larger children. So here's some close-up perspective. And both options are that we're looking at. Again, these are both conceptual, but we're looking at a turnkey project budget of $190,000. And it is going to be a recirculation system, so it's very similar to a pool. We'll have to have a chemical vault and a mechanical vault, etc. But this evening, we brought both options before council to see what would be the preference and your recommendation for which option you would like for us to pursue.
The other thing is the contractor is willing to, once we give them a notice to proceed, they anticipate getting started before Christmas holidays. They expect either design to be completely operational by the springtime. So the contract would be working during the winter season. They don't see that as a problem, provided that they can get into the basic underground work before it really gets the bitter cold time. So again, we have two concepts. One is the baseball concept, and the other, as the staff has referred to it, as the Mickey Mouse concept. Both have above ground features. Would you go back to the baseball concept a moment? In order to hold down the cost, what we were thinking is that Michael LaQuarrie's crews, that they would actually build the wall along the first base, third base, and outfield area. This will give us more funds to enlarge the amount of concrete and to also increase the number of features. In both designs, one of the things that Vortex is giving us is basically what I'm going to call a socket that's at the bottom where it comes out of the concrete. So over time, you could take some of the above-ground features and actually change them out to other above-ground features.
Oh, I know.
One of the things that we would want to do in parks like this is to keep it where the young people continue to have interest. And we feel that about every 5 years, it would be a good thing to change some of these features out. Let's talk about changing them out. The council has expressed a desire to add additional splash pads, not only at Jack Amyette, but at other locations as we can fit it into your capital improvement program. So what you might do is, for example, build this baseball facility at Jack Amyette, matching the baseball program that's there, and then your next splash pad might be at a different park with a completely different design. But over the years, Michael and his staff could actually change out the, what I'll call above ground feature. Now, obviously, you wouldn't put the home run in the Mickey Mouse, but some of the other features can be switched out. So, can we go back to the Mickey Mouse one now?
Yes, sir.
What are your thoughts as to which you would prefer? We can do either, we just need to give the contractor directions.
Does either one offer more capacity, so to speak? Would it, accommodate more people, or?
I think that as of now, we haven't received the revised layout yet for the ball field, but option one, as it's presented, is rather large. I think it has over 2,000 square feet wet play area. We're hoping that we can get a size similar to that on the baseball side, but we're looking at, I mean, it is a significant size splash pad.
The baseball's a nice theme, but I wonder for the kids whether it's going to get old after a season or two.
After the World Series is over?
I kind of like this. Looks more spread out.
One of the advantages, as the staff looked at it, one of the advantages of this design is you really, as you can see, you have at least 4 play areas. Each of the, what I'll call circular areas, and then one in the middle. So there are different groups that could play. While personally I really do like the baseball because it keeps with the theme, I think that would be very interesting. I'm not so sure that you wouldn't wind up, as Mr. Thomas has asked the question, you may wind up with more participants in this, what I'll call unregulated format. The problem with the baseball diamond is it is kind of a regulated format. But again, we are ready to proceed, and we're really looking for the council to tell us which you prefer.
Mayor Pro Tem Lazar has a question.
I have a question in regards to the actual surface and how the water is filtered. How is it kept clean, and sort of like the maintenance and the legal side of this. How will that affect us?
The concrete itself is just brushed concrete. We did look at putting alternative surfaces on there, but we found through our history that with the chemical process, which is, it's treated just like a pool, so you've got the chemical treatment, the chlorine, etc., that combined with the UV rays eats away at that play surface. So in our research, the majority of the splash pads that are found in North Carolina have a brushed concrete surface. But it is regulated by the Department of Health. We do have to get the entire plan approved by Department of Health, and it's inspected twice a year depending on occupancy, the usage, the length of the usage. But it's treated just like a swimming pool.
And there's surface drains that allow the water to be...
Yeah, there's usually drainage in each of the center of the circles. There's probably a drain, and then it all connects. And then in this particular layout, there's an underground storage tank that the water filters back into that, and then it's pumped as it's used.
Could it be used for anything in the off-season?
Probably not, and the reason why is because the above-ground features, I'm sure some people will try to ride their bicycle on there in the winter. We would prefer for it not to be used because while it is a concrete surface, there could be damage.
I'm just wondering how you're going to keep the skateboarders off of it.
Well, that's going to be a challenge, and what we may have to do, we may have to wind up fencing it We wouldn't want to put in a fence to start off with, though. We want this to be as friendly as possible. Again, it runs off of potable water, not well water, and then the potable water is circulated through a treatment facility on site, so it's not a continuous discharge.
What about the liability issues involved here?
Mr. Carter?
Well, the league would cover this, and it would be part of our insurance policy with the league. Several, as they pointed out, several other municipalities throughout the state have them, and they have coverage.
So what is the annualized cost of this to operate?
I'm not sure that we have that actual cost, because obviously you are doing chemicals and it'll be operational 5 months of the year. You will basically open it up in, once, May gets here, you'll close it down around Labor Day, maybe a little bit later. But, once the temperature starts to chill, and of course, because this is potable water, it's not going to be 85-degree water like a swimming pool. It will have probably a 5-month life. Susan, did y'all look into the annual maintenance cost?
Not for the splash pad, no, sir, just the regular chemical expense. We already have staff on site full-time at Jack Amyette, so it would just be, stopping in. We don't anticipate keeping somebody there, because it's gonna operate on an automatic sort of system or a bollard system, so.
So you know that for a fact that there's no legal requirement to have that staffed?
No.
Yes, sir, that's no requirement for that. We didn't even have to have a member of the skateboard
That's right.
park staff, so there's no.
Now, if you build a swimming pool, there is a requirement, but if you have a splash pad, there's no requirement. And as Susan said, there will be a pedestal that you will simply, activate the system.
I'm not personally familiar with the splash pad concept, so I'm trying to learn a little bit here.
Well, Mayor, if you notice the splash pad on the left-hand side, that bubble, it is actually tall enough for adults, so you could become personally familiar with it.
We'll have to give it a whirl.
How long do you get off of a push of a button? I mean, is it programmable or is it?
Yes, it's all programmable. We can set it how long we want to, just depending on usage. I would guess anywhere from 10 to 15 to possibly 20 minutes, and then it does. But as long as there's kids out there, it'll probably stay on the bulk of the day. And then we could automatically add a program so that it can't come on at night.
Correct. That is correct.
And again, the nice thing is it doesn't run the water bill, because while there is some evaporation, and obviously as children leave the facility, they take, water in their suits and on their body. But in talking to the vendor, he talked about the fact that once you fill that tank, you just don't have to keep refilling it. That it is something that does not have a large water bill. Your real expense is going to be in electricity and in chemicals.
Two good options there.
What are your thoughts? Which would you prefer?
Personally, I'd go with option one. That would be my choice if I was making it.
One?
One.
Okay, so that's option 7, because I heard 7.
Did you say yours, Michael? You go with
Well,
one?
we will go ahead and we will verify for you before we sign the contract. We will send you a memo that says, here's our estimate of chemicals and water costs for a year. And then if you have any other questions before we sign the contract, we can certainly come back and you can give us further direction. But at this point, we'll go ahead and begin to finalize the contract on this arrangement, and we'll get you information regarding.
One quick question. So once it's built, it's going to be maintained from the rec department fund?
That's correct.
Not CDBG anymore?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And in what general vicinity of the park will it be?
When you are when you are behind the Jack Amyette basketball facility and, the parking lot, if you are facing towards the school, you have the baseball facility to your right. This is going to be in the open area to the left. Now, we also have, talked to the principal of the school. Part of what CDBG funds will be doing is also putting in an exercise walking trail around the park itself. And the principal of the school said that she supports this. Obviously, they will have limited use of it. But, I would like to comment, Lily Gray with Community Development is here. She is going to be the person helping with the funding. We appreciate that. Susan and Michael on Parks and Recreation. Susan, do you want to come up and make a comment?
I'm fine. Wally was nice enough to remind me that it probably could be comparable to the chlorine at the Freedom Fountain. I don't know that amount, and we're trying to get it real quickly, but that could be a comparison real quickly if we got that. That might be an option to look at.
But we'll get you that information. Well, if you're comfortable with option one, that's what we'll ask Deanna to go ahead and finalize the contracts for. Anything else?
No, sir.
Thank you, Deanna.
Thank you very much.
We would like to take just a moment to brief those council members who are not able to attend the North Carolina League of Municipalities meeting, which occurred last weekend in Winston-Salem. The title of the conference was Ignition, and the purpose of that title is to try to ignite interest in moving cities throughout the state forward. We were very fortunate. We had the mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and Mr. Willingham all attend. John and I also attended. There were a number of concurrent sessions. As you know from attending other meetings, you can't attend every meeting. They go on at the same time. But we do want to talk to you just for a quick overview of what the sessions were about. One of the sessions had to do with the healthcare regulations and issues. While we've been in Obamacare for several years now, there are additional components of Obamacare that are in the process of becoming activated. One will activate in 2018. It's called the Cadillac tax. What the Cadillac tax means is that if your health care program is robust, meaning that the value of it per employee passes a certain threshold, then you as an employer can be charged a tax that you must pay to the Affordable Care Program. We are currently analyzing that, and basically the way to look at it is this. If an employee leaves the employment of the city, they have the right to take the insurance with them. That's called COBRA. And in taking COBRA, they have to pay the full premium. So when you look at that COBRA premium, if it passes a certain threshold, which is basically $10,500, that's not the exact number, but it's close, in the course of a year, then it's considered to be a Cadillac program, and any value above that federal limit, we as the employer will have to pay a tax on that. Now, the federal government, the Congress is working through trying to repeal that. But as many things Congress is working through, we can't guarantee that they will meet their goal. We do have our health consultant coming in, and we're going to be analyzing our program so that we can be assured that we are not to the point of having that Cadillac tax. Here's one of the reasons why it's important. It not only applies to the 550 employees that you, as the mayor and council, provide benefits to. It also has to do with anyone who is on the coverage as a dependent. So even though that employee is paying that dependent cost, if that cost is Cadillac, then we as the employer will not only pay for our employees, but must pay for all people on the plan. That means our exposure is not 550, it's almost 1,000 people. So we will be giving you a report on that. And that was primarily the content of that one. The next one was urbanization and migration in North Carolina. And it's not a surprise to any of you that North Carolina is becoming a more urbanized community and that we're seeing more rural communities struggling. And one of the challenges, I believe there were, what, John, 524, what's the number of municipalities in the state?
540.
540? Okay. While many of them are as large as Jacksonville, the vast majority are small. And one of the challenges that they are going to be facing, and we as a state are facing, is how does small government stay in business? It's going to become a larger and larger challenge. Now, I'm not sure what sessions others sat in on, so any of you who sat in on some of these, feel free to chime right in. I'm just trying to give you a quick overview. The small utility system management and GIS mapping, I don't think any of us sat in on that because that's really small utilities. But basically what they were talking about is what the title says, how you can use GIS as a management tool. Fortunately for the city of Jacksonville, Ron and the IT department and others, including Wally and certainly Pete, we've been into GIS mapping as a benefit for our utility system for a long time. How cities and towns cope with failing revenues and growing demand. The best news out of this is they started off by saying that the privilege license is going to be fully funded to all municipalities. And then they said, oops, April Fool. So, you know, again, this is not anything new to you. As cities can no longer annex, as we have restrictions placed upon us by the state legislature, we are facing, you know, the difficulty of revenues capping out, service demands not decreasing, and growing demands for service. Now, some of y'all attended that.
John, actually, John and I, plus Mayor Pro Tem Lazar was actually the moderator for that session, and you know, it was very informative. A lot of good discussion, you know, within the groups that, on these different issues that we're facing. Was there any solutions found? Probably not. You know, but we do the realization is there that we are going to face problems in the future. You know, as far as being able to fund, you know, local government like you're talking about.
Any others?
I think the important thing to also, as part of the big message is how do municipalities continue to exchange dialogue with our legislative partners and making them understand that we know how to best run our cities, and then also gapping the bridge between the effects of legislation and the actual citizens. I think that there's a gap there that is kind of lost in the discussion, that there is an effect. Although we get the brunt of it, the citizens ultimately get the brunt of it. And so we're trying to figure out how to bridge those gaps and build public trust back in local government. And
One
I think
thing
that
that I
was a
saw
big key.
come out of, along the lines of what you're talking about, one of the themes that kept recurring was the fact that we need to have our citizens, we need to engage our citizens to engage our legislators. Hearing from us doesn't have the impact that it does hearing from the people that are actually affected by this. A lot of times, I think the cities get pushed off into a little corner here, just like any other special interest group, and that's how we're treated. Whereas, you know, the voters, you know, if they're the ones carrying the message, just like with the anti-annexation issue, you know how that was accomplished. They flooded the legislature with their presence, and something like that, you know, is what's going to happen. You know, when property taxpayers at the local level get tired of having just playing this revenue shell game and want to step up and start putting pressure on the legislatures, that's when they're going to perk up and listen. It's not going to come from us.
And the other thing is that the people are accustomed to a certain level of service, and those demands continue to grow on municipal governments. And you know, to take away is very difficult, but to find revenues to keep the support and to find revenues to offset current revenues is even a bigger challenge. So I think we talked about there was 1,680, don't quote me on this, 1,667 bills filed in just this single session. And, you know, they all may have been great bills, but there's some impacts. And so I think bridging the gap of information is going to be an important issue.
This session is typical of what's to come. It seems like the legislature is going to usurp more and more of the local authority.
A way forward to redeveloping public spaces, travel and tourism, pros and cons of police. Let's talk about that a moment. We will be bringing you a detailed report in the very near future regarding body cams. The chief and others in the city have been working on policies. One of the things that came out of this report was don't buy anything and don't implement anything until you have a firm understanding of what your policy is. had a person from the ACLU speak in favor of the body cams, but he also made the point, you got to have a policy that's very clearly understood by your officers as to when they can and cannot turn that camera on. For example, if a couple is fighting on the sidewalk, police department has the right to video that. That's public space. If a couple is fighting inside their house and that police officer goes through the door, according to the ACLU attorney, not our own handsome attorney, the ACLU attorney said, whoops, once you pass that threshold, you're in private territory. You do not have the right to video that. Those are the type of issues we're going to have to work through. So while we are moving towards securing body cams and bringing them back for you to discuss, we will do that in a very planned and well thought out fashion. Real quickly, in the interest of time, the key to shaping your future, engaging and educating citizens. These sessions talked, again, about the fact citizens do not really understand that they even live inside your city. If they've got a mailing address that's Jacksonville, they assume they're Jacksonville taxpayers. And again, many of the things that we do, just like we talked about tonight, how many people in this city realize that your sanitation department gives over 1 million service calls a year? That's amazing. Okay. And then, of course, downtown economic redevelopment. John did a great tour on that. Broadband solutions for economic and community development. And then we went through operating principles. And in the interest of time, we won't really spend much time on that. Probably the highlight of the entire meeting, though, occurred when it came to voting for our officers for the coming year. We are extremely proud of Mr. Lazara. He has been elected by the North Carolina League of Municipalities as the second vice president. Now here's some historical data. He is going to be the last second vice president because they're changing the constitution and bylaws of the league where they will no longer have second vice presidents. So Mr. Lazara will be the last second vice president. A year away, he will become the first vice president, and then a year after that, he will become the president.
First president.
The first
And the year
president.
after that, it'd be the past president.
The past president.
So that'll be one of the questions 5 years from now.
Anyone, Mr. Willingham, John, Mr. Lazara, Mayor, any other comments about the
I
conference?
think it was very productive myself. I thoroughly got a lot out of it. The other thing was the opportunity to network with fellow North Carolina, city leaders and compare notes on things. It's always a good opportunity to do that. You can learn a lot that way. Things that you can reintroduce into your community.
Mr. Willingham? Mr. Lazara?
Thank you.
Mr. Carter? Mayor, that concludes the items for this workshop.
Okay. Thank you very much. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.